Well, welcome to everybody who's joining us today from all over the world, literally. Thank you for taking time out on a Friday to enjoy what is the final webinar in our Level Up series. We've had some amazing guests over the last 6 weeks, and this week is definitely no exception to that. So just while everybody starts to filter in, for those of you who don't know us or are maybe new to the Fabric webinars, I am Lisa, founder of Fabric Academy and marketing and communications agency Unwritten Group. And this at the top is Maddie, who is head of delivery at Fabric. Maddie is going to be in the background, making sure we get all of your questions in order for a little later on when we open the floor to you guys. And as you can see, I am currently taking remote work into a whole new level as I'm on holiday in Mallorca at the moment. So apologies for the very beautiful background, and hopefully it's not too distracting. So when I started out in marketing some 20 years ago now, the only option I had around training was an academic route, and it just wasn't for me. So I started to learn whilst I was in a job, a low-level marketing role, and I learned from trial and error, really, trying different techniques, trying different things, seeing what worked and what didn't work. And it's an okay way to learn, but it's a really, really tough way to progress, and especially if you're ambitious and want to make your mark early in your career. So we built Fabric, which is almost 2 years old now, and the sole purpose around that was to help empower marketers to thrive. So to provide that real hands-on practical support, so you can really progress in your career as quickly as possible. And with these series of webinars, we've been trying to give you as much value, as much knowledge, and as much support to all of our community as we possibly can to help you become the best marketer possible. So before I get started and I introduce the lovely Katy to you, please do say a quick hi in the chat and let us know who you are. And don't forget to switch your chat feature to all panelists and attendees, just so we can see you. So we have got an incredible guest today who is a huge inspiration to so many people in the marketing world. Katy is managing director of social powerhouse Social Chain and has been making waves in the industry for the last decade. She's worked with some amazing brands such as Coca Cola, Superdry and Missguided, and is an initiator of social first campaigns underpinned by psychology and data, which is what we're going to talk about today. She's been recognized for her groundbreaking achievements both inside and out of the business. She's been instrumental in Social Chain's fast growth and has spearheaded a range of initiatives to drive positive cultural change. Her podcast, I shouldn't say this, but drives critical and honest conversations about working life and the importance of life outside of work, and is one of my personal favorites. In this webinar, we're going to be talking to you about how you can incorporate psychological techniques into your marketing and cut through the oversaturation in the digital world to get your brand noticed. And we're going to be talking about what that even means. To some of us, we might not even know what that means. So Katy and I are going to be chatting for the next 30 minutes or so, and then we're going to open the floor to you guys to answer all your questions. So keep the questions coming in into the Q&A box. Maddie will be sorting through them, and we'll try and get all of them answered as we go through here. So Katy, a huge welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. That was such a good introduction.
Oh, I'm glad I got that okay. We've been so excited to talk to you today. And just before we get started, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words before we get going with the questions?
Yes, of course. So yeah, I think you did a pretty good job at it, to be honest.
Good.
Yeah, I have, my name's Katy Leeson and I'm Managing Director of Social Chain UK. We are a social media marketing agency and publisher as well. I've been with Social Chain for 5 years. I was made MD after just 6 months with the company, and I've been in media and marketing, starting off in the traditional media planning and buying of press, radio and outdoor 16 years ago. So I've been in the media world for quite a while, and I think you summarized it pretty amazingly well, that I am really passionate about data and understanding people to help create the best solutions for our clients, but then also how to focus on creating a culture that makes people want to work for Social Chain and enables growth and development, and because we all want to be happy in our work, we spend so much time there. So a big focus of mine is on culture and making sure that we've got the right place for anyone who wants to come and work with us. And because of those two different things being merged together, we have grown exponentially, and we work with some of the biggest brands in the world now. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Good. And I think, you know, the cultural side, we'll try and touch on a little bit as well if we have got time, because it's such an important part of working life now. And it, you know, I think Social Chain for me really stands out as an agency that has seen really fast growth, but is really known for this amazing culture, and that almost supersedes its reputation for anything else, which I think is a phenomenal achievement in, you know, in today's kind of crazy world of, you know, you can work almost anywhere all day, every day, but making sure that that balance between work life and home life is right is really, really interesting.
Yeah, as I say, you spend so much time in work that it's important.
Yeah, completely. Okay, so a couple of questions that we're going to talk through now, and I'm going to start with this one. So we're all faced with thousands of adverts in our day, and especially during the pandemic, you know, we've been bombarded with them completely, and lots of us have been subject to that digital fatigue. How can brands be mindful of this when they're creating their content? How can they do a really good job to make sure that you know, you get that balance right?
Yeah, so just to throw some stats on you about how bombarded we are in the world right now. So on average, we get about 4,000 advertising messages a day, which is a lot. And we're also members of about 8.5 social networks individually as well, which seems like a lot, but if you start to list them out, you've got Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, the dating apps. There, you can quickly get to that number, which is, it was a surprise when I first heard it. And then in terms of what we're hit with on social channels, we've got like 95 million photos and videos are shared on Instagram a day. Facebook has over 2.5 trillion posts to date, and 500 million tweets are sent a day. So we're absolutely bombarded. And couple that with the fact that in an internet minute, we're also trying to do our work. So we've got millions and millions of emails that are sent, 2.878 million video views. We're really busy. My favorite one though is that nearly 1 million Tinder swipes happen in an internet minute. So we're not just competing with other advertisers as well for attention, because the fight for attention is so intense. We're also competing with life, and we've then really got to think about the best way to compete, not just against your competitor, but all of those other things that people are getting bombarded with at the same time. And the key for me, and the thing that I always try and talk about, is everything else is a real waste of time if you don't do social first creative that provides value to your audience. And what I mean by that is there's sort of like 5 things that I like to look at around that topic, because the other side of it is there's always seem to be quick hacks. So you can go on social, go on YouTube, how to hack the algorithm, how to do this, how to gamify, like how to quickly get your engagement. But the reality is, us as humans will engage with something if we see value in it. So the first thing that I always like to look at is why people share. And there's a few things about why people share. To improve the lives of others there was a New York Times study that went through this. So the first one is to improve other people's lives. So if you're thinking about it from a brand point of view, what can you share that will help improve people's lives? What can you share that is a tip or a bit of knowledge or something that they can share to make themselves look smarter and more valuable to their friends in the network? The second thing is to define themselves, to create an online persona. So really think about, when you're creating your content, something that fits with your audience interests, and again, something that you think that they'd be proud to share. And the reason for that is upward social comparison. So our minds soak up anything that they see as reference points for comparison of what would make us happier and appear more successful. So what can I share that's going to make me look more successful and more happy? And if we think about the phenomenon that was baking banana bread in lockdown, is a great example of that, because you saw so many people doing it, you were like, I should really do this and share it as well. So that is a simple example of how you can really use social to help other people define themselves. Another one is how you can grow and nourish relationships, connecting in real time, even though it's not in person, can actually be as good as an in-person social connection. And I think we've noticed that in lockdown, by being able to have Zoom calls, catch up with friends. The role of social has actually changed, or the main reason that people are using social has actually changed in the last 12 months. Pre-pandemic, we were noticing that people were using it more just to share content and for content consumption. But it's actually been leapfrogged by the original usage of the platforms, which is social connections and staying in touch with friends and family. And as things have started to ease as well, we've noticed that that is staying. So that's a great thing. Self-fulfillment is another thing of why people share. So everyone likes feeling like they're valuable and getting positive feedback. So a study has found that consumers enjoy content more when they share it, and they enjoy content more when it's shared with them. So creating really informative content to help your audience achieve this feeling regularly is the key there. And then the final part of the survey, before I dive into the real psychological things that you can do with your content, is to get the people share because they want to get the word out about causes they believe in. So really think about, as a brand, when you're sharing, is there something that you're doing internally with your culture or your CSR that really aligns in an authentic way that you can share, that will then engage people and help them share your message further? So my starting point is always understanding why people share. And then I've got, after that, is some really good tips about how the brain works and why social is the key to unlocking that and how to do it. So social proofing actually builds brand trust. And there's something that's released in the brain, oxytocin, which is the trust hormone. It releases when someone feels part of something, and people are actually more likely to change their mind or their behavior when the result will make them feel better about themselves, which often means being part of a wider group and feeling like you're part of a wider group. And my tip there of relating that back to social media is to take advantage of user-generated content. So if you think about that banana bread example, loads of people doing it, you'll feel like you're part of a group. If as a brand you then start to get people, say if you're a hospitality company and you start sharing people's UGC when they're sharing it online, it will then make more people feel part of a group and encourage them to do the same, which increases that trust hormone, which then increases trust in your brand. So that's my first big tip on the psychology. I've just seen, I know I'm talking fast, I've just seen that note. I think it's being recorded as well, so yeah, I think you'll be able to go back on this.
Yeah.
The second thing is actually one of my favorite psychological things to talk about on social is that you can use emojis to actually increase connection, which sounds crazy, but as humans, mimicking expressions when you're face to face with someone is one way of becoming closer to them. And emojis actually activate the same part of the brain and replicate the same experience as those face-to-face interactions, which make everyone feel more connected. And we've tested it on pieces of content. So we've used in two different things. We were doing a product promo for Holland & Barrett. In the same offer, same product, no paid behind it. The first one that we tested, we used the leaf emoji. And the second one, we used the secret face emoji. And we actually increased engagement by 1/3 by using the face emoji. Yeah. So just thinking about mimicking face emoji in your content in the right way to build those relationships with people. Color is always a really good one to think of, because color, actually, people tend to make decisions on a brand within 90 seconds of an initial interaction, and 90% of that assessment is based on color. So really looking into the meaning of color and what people take from color when they're trying to learn a little bit more about your brand and what you want them to get out of the brand. It's matching that up with your brand personality, and then people will make that right connection when they're making those decisions. So again, for example, some really good examples here of like brands that do it really well. You think of Coca Cola, you think red, and red is all about excitement, strength, love, energy. If you think about Glossier, one of the best brands on social, a lot of their stuff is white, which is clean, simplicity, innocence, honest. And if you're putting something on your skin, you really want to be evoking that sort of message as well. And the final one, and I know I've talked quite quickly through these, is something about reciprocity. So reciprocity is the theory of basically scratching backs. If you do something for someone, they will naturally want to do something for you in return. So you think about if you invite a friend to a party, it might feel like there's an obligation to for them to invite you to something when they have their party. So in the context of social, people are more likely to say yes to those people that they owe. So my tip on that is to really get people involved and tagging friends and give something as a first move, and then they're more likely to build that relationship with you after. So I know I've really just rattled through those, but my main ones are really think about your use of emojis, think about building trust as a group by using people outside of just the company, think about the colour for connecting with your brand personality, and think about being the first to give something away, and then building that trust and building that that group of people together because they feel like they owe you something.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and some absolutely brilliant insights and ideas there. And I guess what's really interesting is that years back, data in marketing was almost a bit of a black art. It was, people were a little bit terrified of it, and it's so valuable, isn't it, in terms of trying to make those connections and being able to test, the emoji example you gave us there, looking at the data, looking at what it does for you, because it gives that knowledge, it gives that power to be able to really make sure that what you're putting out there is getting the best reactions. Fascinating.
Good. Yeah, I find it so interesting, and just the way the brain works and how to link that with the ways that we can use it in the right way to build the best network that you can for your brand on social.
Completely. So I guess you started to explain a little bit of this in that last answer there, but just to really dig into this, because psychology in marketing, I think, is still relatively quite a new term. And when we talk about psychology in marketing, what does this really mean, and how important is it to have that psychological awareness when it comes to marketing? How does it help improve it?
I think the thing with marketing is we're trying to reach people, and when we're trying to reach people in a place where we are so distracted by everything else going on, having a knowledge of how to build connections with your brand through the use of how the mind works and how it builds trust and how it engages, and I think is a really important step in creating the most engaging content that will stand out. Because as I say, there's so many hacks out there of how you can hack the algorithm, but the reality is, if you're doing something that really fits with your brand, but also understands your consumer and what they're trying to get out of having a relationship with you, be it follow you on social or interact with you on social or be a customer, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we talk a lot about personas, and personas were almost the next step to market segmentation, but now really getting into the psyche of that persona, so their emotional traits, their behavioral traits, much more than just demographic, proves so valuable to be able to really reach and engage with them in the right ways. Okay, so Social Chain, I guess, is one of the fastest growing agencies in the world and has scaled massively with you at the helm, Katy. How can marketers provide value on a global scale?
So yeah, we have grown massively now. We've got our New York office, we've got one with our head of board is based in Germany. We've got the UK. We're just about to open our London location as well. So we we've done it one step at a time, and really I think a lot of it is we've built a really solid brand at Social Chain, and we know what we stand for, and we're unapologetic about that, and we don't steer away from what we've become known for. Helped massively by obviously having a founder like Stephen Bartlett, who just helped elevate the name of Social Chain and built a really clever marketing strategy around the agency and understood the value of PR and us being at the forefront of any conversation. So we've got that coupled with incredibly strong values that we don't move away from. So the reason that we exist is to keep brands at the forefront of what's possible. And we do that by being first, fearless, and ever changing. And those things don't change regardless of the market. And what that might mean in a different market could be completely different. But what we go out with is always a consistent values message. And then clients know what they're getting when they come to us. And we've become known as social pioneers and people who understand social better than anyone else, and are able to then build campaigns that they wouldn't be able to get from anyone else because of the expertise that we've got within social media marketing.
Yeah, and the journey has been phenomenal. I mean, what attracted you to Social Chain in the very beginning? Was the culture already there and set? Was it very values based then, or has that been a huge part of your journey there?
It was definitely, there was only about 30 people, I think, when I started 5 years ago. The reason that I joined was because I knew that I needed to learn about social media and digital. Having worked in traditional media for quite a while and then moving into a new business and marketing role where I got a bit more exposure to how my previous previous company was working and operated, I kind of felt like if I didn't get that digital knowledge under my belt, then I would be left behind. And I'm not ambitious in that I knew I always wanted to be an MD, because I never thought that was the thing, but I'm quite ambitious against myself, and I always like to do well. And I knew that if I was going to future-proof myself, then that was it. And it kind of was very, very strange timing, as all these things are. It just popped up out of nowhere. Steve started following me on Twitter. I saw some of the campaigns that they'd done, and just got in touch, and it escalated from there. But my reason for joining was never with the intention to be where I am now. It was always, what can I learn to help my knowledge? And it was a leap of faith, because it definitely was a startup when I started. And I've just been very, very lucky to work around some incredibly talented people and done some amazing work to get us to where we are today.
Yeah, the journey's been phenomenal to watch. So will you share with us some of the steps that you guys take at Social Chain to get to know your customers inside out, really kind of get to know the psychology behind the ideal buyer or the persona?
Yeah, so we always start with really understanding the audiences, and we spend a lot of time with our data team. It's probably one of our USPs. We've got a really solid in-house data offering. The beauty as well of what we've got with the publishing pages is that we can tap into an audience of 80 million people that we can do pulse surveys on to understand their motivations or their feelings and their understanding of brands, which gives us a really solid base before we even start any work. So everything we do is grounded in data and people understanding at the heart before we do anything. And then we come up with our strategies and our creatives by matching up people with incredible talent that have worked in the industry for a long time with people that are fresh to marketing, didn't know that this existed, but they're just super efficient and amazing on social platforms that are emerging, so TikTok experts. So it's really coupling up knowledge of people and what they expect and how they feel about brands with knowing how to use the social platforms to our best efforts to get the right response.
And that's really interesting. I love the mix there of the really experienced with the really fresh, new, different perspective, because you really see things differently. Those two things coupled together, almost the secret ingredient to anything, right? But it really, yeah, it's great. I think in terms of really progressing that person inside the role, but also just getting to know the customer, getting different opinions on the customer. So what about brands then, in terms of how can brands cut through the noise? I know we talked in the first few questions about a couple of ideas there, but if there's anybody in here who has a brand that's really trying to make an impact and get their message out there, what can they be doing?
I think really be authentic. I think people know now straight away if you're not being authentic to the values that you stand for as a company, and that'll work against you if you're not. Know your customer and know your audience and what they're trying to get out of being following you. What is the value that you can offer them to help fuel those reasons why people share? Because in order to get traction and build a community, you need to know why people might want to follow you. And then just on the basis of community, really think about your community management strategy. I think it's one of the most important things that brands can really consider is, what is your tone of voice? It's not just a customer service add-on to what you're doing already. It is it's your vocal point to the world, and you can really build an amazing community of loyal customers who want to buy from you but also want to follow you and share and engage in that sort of UGC content if you're thinking about those things in the right way. And then I've obviously touched on the importance of understanding colour and how that can help, and then thinking about ways that you can get people to engage by making them feel part of something bigger, and giving them value that they then want to share to their community.
Yeah, and it all stems back to just understanding what that community wants, isn't it? If you know, you know what they want, you can provide that value, not what you're trying to push out there, but what's really valuable to that community. So amazing. Okay, so what would you say are the 5 most important things to consider when it comes to keeping that all-important human connection? Is there, I mean, the emojis is fascinating, isn't it? In terms of, you don't realize, I think, until we've all been locked down for such a period of time, how important that connection of facial expressions is. And I'm sure we probably never realized emojis could be so powerful in that way. But any other important things that we can do to keep that human connection going?
I think, like I've just touched on with the community management, I think that is a great way of you building your tone of voice with your audience. The emoji thing is super interesting. Just putting yourself or putting an employee front and center, and encouraging real star people within the business to be faces and voices of brands is something to consider as well, because people buy from people. And we do it to quite a lot of success by having people within the business that are experts within their field talking about that on social. And that helps elevate our brand, because we're then seen as experts in all the areas that we touch. So there are different ways of doing it. Yeah, I think that they probably be my tips.
Brilliant. So just, I guess we get asked this a lot in the fabric community, and I think you're such a great example of how we can really answer this question well. But I mean, your story has been so impressive, because you've, as you've mentioned there, you've started in an agency and moved through that agency, progressed really quickly. But there's this perception still, I guess, particularly around the agency world. We find here in the North that, you have to work every single hour God sends, and every single day. And, you almost work yourself into the ground to really get to where you need to be. But, we know now that, well-being and balancing that with lifestyle and professional, goals is as important, or more so than ever before. I guess you obviously have been super ambitious. How do you manage to retain that, and how do you make sure that you have a good work-life balance with looking after kind of that mental well-being side?
Yeah, and let's be brutally honest, it's been hard in the last 18 months, hasn't it? Just try and get that balance right. But I think I learned the hard way when I was in a previous role, and I didn't put myself first, and I didn't realize at the time what I was doing to myself, and I was getting migraines every day. And the migraines had the aura with it as well, so it was debilitating, but I still powered through. Thought it couldn't be anything to do with stress. I didn't think anything about work, but I was putting so much pressure on myself to be something and achieve something, that I was making myself poorly. And I think, unfortunately, going through that has enabled me now to realize that I can give my best in a way that doesn't impact my health, because me getting to that state and being that poorly for so long. And it happened every day for a long time that I was getting migraines, being in that state. The company wasn't getting the best out of me, and I wasn't getting the best out of myself either. But I think at the heart of it is care. Like, I've always cared about the company I work for, the work that I do, the people that I work with, and having that care for the work. I think you can then build a work-life balance around it, because the time that you're spending on your work, the care comes through and you achieve. And I've had to really put boundaries in place for myself to know when I have to stop, because I know that I'll be no good to anyone at Social Chain if those migraines start coming back again, because it'll just wipe me out for a long time. So it was tough, and it was a tough thing to realize as well, that that's what it was, because you just think it could be you're just a bit poorly, or you'll take medication and it'll stop. But the reality was that it was stress related. It wasn't physical. My biggest thing that I did was starting to do yoga, because I couldn't focus on anything else. So trying to do a balance in yoga, you can't be also thinking about the other things that you've got to do that day, otherwise you fall flat on your face. And just having that as my outlet was the start of me becoming a bit more aware of overworking. And I think there's a difference. You can care about your work and you can put stuff into it while you've got the energy, but just staying late because someone might say, if you leave at 5:30, oh, you're only doing a half day today. I'm sure we've all heard that. And those sort of people time monitoring and that presenteeism just for the sake of doing it is where I draw the line on overworking.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice. And I think it's been, the pandemic has thrown all sorts of different things in the works, and it's allowed us all to be much freer with where we work and how we work, but it's also allowed us to overwork really easily, especially when you're at the helm of a business and you've got a team to protect. But I think more so than ever before, I think it's now becoming much more important and right at the forefront of so many businesses that the well-being of their employees is far more important than anything else. And actually, when they're happy and they're well and they're left as adults to make their own choices about when they work and how they work, that business then skyrockets. So there's some really positives come out, I think, of the situation we've all been put into. But it's great to hear that, I guess, that honest account of how you've got there, because it's not easy, is it? Okay, last question from me, and then we're going to open the floor to everybody else. So I can see some questions starting to go in there. Feel free to start popping them in. And I guess this is a question that I've wondered, but you are a big advocate for women in business and mentoring girls and females in the workplace. Has being female in what was, I guess, perceived as a predominantly male industry ever played a part in your journey? Have you faced any, I guess, hard times because of that, or has it not affected you in any way?
I'm not sure it has affected me from outsiders in. I think it's probably affected me from me outwards, if that makes sense. So I was handed the role of MD after 6 months of joining Social Chain, bearing in mind that I joined not knowing anything about social media marketing, because I joined because I wanted to learn. And having the title of managing director evoked in my brain images of an old man in a grey suit who sat in a corner of an office and didn't talk to anyone. And for me, that was a challenge to overcome why I was right for that role, because it was definitely that imposter. That's where I talk about imposter syndrome, because that's what held me back, is my thoughts on what a managing director should be. And I can't be that. I can't be an old man in a grey suit. It's not me. And I can't not speak to people, because my values are all about care and fun, and I need to bring that out or I don't feel fulfilled. And it took me a while to really get my head around that, to make sure that I am comfortable with being the vocal point for a company with as much exposure as Social Chain has got. So it's not been easy, but I do think I've done it more to myself. And there is a little bit something in there about society as well, in the image that we all conjure up when we think of managing director. If you type it into Google Images, the images are all the same. Yeah. So we're being told from all directions, as well as ourselves, that we shouldn't be in these roles. But the reality is, by one of the reasons that I do talk up so much and I do so much with my own personal brand is I'm a big believer in you can't be what you can't see. So if I'm in this position, I've got a real responsibility to help other people know that they can do it.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, it's one of my, I think that is so important, and why we try and kind of open our platforms and our communities to all different, everybody who's different in a role that they might eventually want to be in. And also those who have progressed a non-typical route, who haven't necessarily gone down an academic route or have learned on the job, but just really making sure that especially our kind of younger generations coming through now can see that there is opportunity out there for everybody. You don't have to be a stereotype of a certain role. Okay, Katie, that's been amazing. We've got loads of questions in, so I'm going to start working through some of these. I'm going to do our very best to answer all of the questions, but if we don't get through them all, please do reach out to us on socials afterwards. We will be following up with an email, so we'll try and get all the answers in there, but we will answer everything afterwards if we don't get them through on this next half an hour or so. So I'm going to start with Elsie's question, because we've just touched a little bit on this one. And she said she is a young marketer 2 years into her career, and she knows that there's still room for constant development. However, it can all seem a little bit overwhelming trying to plan for the future whilst juggling day-to-day work and personal activities. So I think we can probably all resonate with that. She know that it's about finding a balance, and each person will find a different solution that fits them. But are there any resources or general life advice that you would be able to provide to try to make a profound impact on your own personal brand, and how to apply that in a job role? So it's quite a long one there. Hopefully you got all that. But any recommendations or resources for general life advice for making that impact?
I think the biggest thing that anyone can do is understand their values. Because if you know your own personal values, you can then start to build out your own personal brand strategy, because you know your pillars that you want to be able to talk about. You also know what you're going to get the most fulfillment out of from your role in the company that you're in, and you can really start to craft out the bits that you're the most passionate about. Because if you're living your values, you're going to be engaged, you're going to be empowered, and you're going to create brilliant work. And I did not know my personal values until I started doing my podcast. And I had about 3, 4, 5 guests that came on in the first series. Every single one talked about knowing your values. And I did not know my values. So I spent a lot of time really understanding what they were. And there's an amazing company, it's called Amazing. There's a brilliant company called Amazing If. And they have a book called Squiggly Careers, and they talk about how now the career path isn't the traditional ladder. You don't go into a company and work your way up step by step. What happens now is you move sideways, or you move up, and then you move within a company. And it very much mirrored my own career path. They've got loads of content on their website, which is amazingif.com. And there's so much on there, but there's a great podcast episode of theirs where they talk about finding your values and the exercise to be able to do it. I would recommend that to anyone, because then you know really that you're on the right track.
Yeah, and we'll pop that in the email to follow up as well, Elsie, in case you didn't get that. But anything we talk about today, we'll pop in there as well. Brilliant. So a question here from Vito, who's joining us from New Zealand today. How important is it to use videos on social for that human connection?
It's very important to use videos. Videos are the thing that platforms always do prioritize. So now as well, where we're living in the growth of TikTok generation, everything, and all the other platforms of watching TikTok really closely, videos are super important, and it's something that does help feed the algorithm. And I know I'm not talking about hacking it, but I'm talking about using it in the right way to get the most out of it.
Yeah, and again, it's a great way to get personality across, and authenticity, and that emotion in your face that you really miss in a tweet or a blog or a piece of written content. So okay, so from Georgina here, what are the top 5 details to consider when creating a social strategy?
Oh, that's a good one. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve with it. So that's probably one of them. First thing is your audience and knowing them with enough detail to know what they're looking for. The second would be like what your objectives are. Is it that you're there to create a community? Is it that you're there to encourage love for your brand? Are you trying to generate sales? Is there something else that you're trying to achieve with your strategy? So really starting with those, and then looking at the right platforms as well for your audience. So I talked briefly then about TikTok. It's probably my favorite new thing in the world. It's just, you just get so sucked into it, but it's not right for everyone, but it could be perfect for your brand. So don't be dismissive of platform, really think about platform. And then within that, make sure that your whatever you produce is right for that platform. Don't just copy and paste across multiple channels, because people go to different platforms for different reasons.
Yeah, we see that.
Yeah, and then also think about your creative as well. Is it going to engage people? Is it telling an authentic story? Is it what the audience are looking for? Is it something that the audiences are going to want to share? And then also, we are working in a pay-to-play market across a lot of the platforms. Facebook and Instagram now prioritize people over brands. So if you want to get traction on there, you are going to have some consideration to paid marketing in order to reach your audiences in volume and at the right way.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, question here from Lathina. Consumer behavior is constantly changing. How do you stay up to date?
And social media is constantly changing. That is another thing. How do you stay up to date? I like to, there's certain things on LinkedIn that I follow. We've got something great at Social Chain that's called Social Minds, that gives me the updates that I need. I posted about it on my LinkedIn yesterday. So if anyone does want to go and see whether we had a small window of 500 users that we launched yesterday. So if anyone wants to do that, you can find that on my LinkedIn if they've not already gone. But I think it's just being inquisitive. There's so much value out there in terms of content and understanding people, and blogs and websites and podcasts. I think it's finding the way that you learn the best that isn't going to become a chore, and you get value out of it. So that's kind of a woolly answer, but it's because there's so much out there.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's, as a marketer, we constantly get asked this question: how do you stay up to date with the latest trends or techniques or softwares or platforms? And it's virtually impossible for you as one person to stay up to date with everything. And I guess our advice has always been, find a specialist in that area in your team who has a real passion for either that channel or that platform or that content or that customer, and let them hone in on that and make it their role or responsibility to stay up to date with that trend, and somebody else for another and another, so that the specialism is coming into the team, but it's not all on one person, because you would just drive yourself crackers trying to stay up to date. You just couldn't do it, could you?
Completely. And I was saying, when I was talking about my imposter syndrome with my therapist a couple of years ago, she said, when you're buying a house, you would never do the job of the estate agent or the solicitor. And we try and do everything, and we shouldn't. You should build your network of experts. And Twitter's an amazing place for knowledge like that. If you follow Adam from Instagram on Twitter, he gives you all of the insider tips before it launches. He's got a really good feed. So there are different pockets of places where you can also find external stimulus to help as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so are there any current social media campaigns that stand out to you, and do any particular brands come to mind? Anyone who's doing a great job at the moment?
Oh, I could do a shameless plug, couldn't I? Here,
you could.
we do have some incredible creative work that's launching, but I can't talk about that. That's starting next Wednesday, so keep an eye out on the Social Chain channels for that, because I'm incredibly proud of that. We have just done our first ever NFT football kit launch for Puma and Man City, so that was pretty cool. In terms of brands that are doing really well, the obvious ones are always Innocent. Their tone of voice on social is incredible, and they know exactly how to speak to their customers. And a great an example of what I was talking about before is knowing platform as well and being on the platforms in the right way. They launched their TikTok not long ago and it's absolutely genius. It's really, really funny. So I think they're doing a great job at social. Gymshark is always very, very good because it's always up to date with what's going on, so in touch with culture. I'm probably not saying ones that you wouldn't know yourselves because everyone just obsesses over those. And my favorite one for community management and being relevant is always Yorkshire Tea. Out to Ollie at Yorkshire Tea who works there, because he just runs that incredibly well, and they always have a hilarious tone of voice that fits with the brand message.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Innocent's one of my all-time favorites. But again, following these brands who do a phenomenal job also teaches you, how you can adapt your style, how you can make sure you're authentic, how it gives you ideas, doesn't it? In terms of how they're doing it, and also sets a bit of a benchmark to be able to, to really set goals for yourself. Okay, so a question from Sarah here. Is there anything you'd adapt about your tips to suit a business that is selling a more niche service B2B rather than a product?
I don't think so, because I think when we've done it with our B2, because if you think when we do our marketing, we do B2B, and I think a lot of what we're trying to do is fulfill the values of what Social Chain is. So the podcast that we've got, Social Minds, is always there to add value and to keep people up to date with the latest in social media. It's still the same. Like, I'm still a consumer for both B2B and for product. And I think just thinking about the value that you can add to someone as a business in a B2B environment, just like you think about the value you add to someone's life as a consumer in a B2C market, is that it's the platform really that you think about in those terms. LinkedIn is an amazing place for B2B.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question here from Amy. She's saying she's just finished a psychology undergrad and will be starting a master's in marketing in September. What sparked your interest in psych and social media marketing?
It wasn't something that anyone was really touching on. She might know better than me because I'm not obviously in that world. But I hadn't seen many people talk about the benefits of linking psychology with content. And I do like to understand the reasons why we do things as humans. So it was just connecting to passions really, and understanding that we are trying to ultimately achieve something and get some action out of a person. And I thought in order to do that, when getting annoyed at all these people that are talking on social about how to hack our algorithm and get to where you want to be, I wanted to just put a bit more rigor and science behind it rather than the cowboys that you see on YouTube.
Yeah. I love that. We talk about rigor all the time, and I always think it makes it seem really unsexy and cool when creative is meant to be so full, but we love some rigor and discipline around that. Okay, so a question here from Lauren in Canada. Hi, Lauren. So I'm always thinking about career growth, and it's not that she's unhappy in her role as a social media and community relations officer, but she's always thinking about what's next for me, what I can do next, what can I do to grow. She's saying, what continued development could we recommend?
There is something amazing that I read in a book that I'd never thought of before, but it is an exercise that you set 3 minutes on your phone timer and you add 5 years onto your age. So when I did it, it was what would Katy at 42 want to be doing? And for those 3 minutes, you write consistently what your life would be like, what job you're doing, what you're achieving, where you live, what your family lifestyle looks like, whether you've got any pets. And it sounds a little bit like crazy, but actually in unediting yourself like that and spending those 3 minutes, you can get really clear like guidance from yourself as to what you really want to achieve in the next 5 years. Because I've never had a plan. I've never said this is what I want to be when I grow up. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Yeah. But in doing that exercise, it became from a different perspective and tapped into my real personal desires, which then I've been able to build a plan around and look for stimulus to help me get to those places that I want to be and help me focus as well, because there's so much that you could be doing. If you know what the ultimate aim is and the end goal for the next 5 years, then you can build your strategy of how to get there. So it's not really tip in terms of follow this person or read this or do that, but it's really about understanding yourself and your values again, and knowing what it is you want to achieve, and then build your strategy around that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's building your own personal strategy for growth, as well as a marketing strategy or a business strategy, putting yourself into that picture and really setting some goals from the outset. And I was exactly the same. I had no clue where I was going to go, where I was going to end up, what I was looking to do. But I would say never stop the learning side, continuous learning. I mean, we are obsessed with continuous learning, and we dedicate one day a week to a learning day, because not only does it teach you so much, but there's always an opportunity with learning. Something new always opens, a door always opens, something, you get introduced to somebody you didn't know you were going to meet, or there's always something there. So I would say as much time as you can dedicate to continuous learning, no matter what level you're at, starting out or really advanced, keep doing that, because it's a really great way to kind of progress quickly. Okay, a great question here. So how can you encourage more conservative brands to use new channels like TikTok?
I think if you want to take advantage, so the thing with the algorithms when these platforms start out is the first adopters usually get the most out of it. So with TikTok right now, if you're a brand on there and you can get your strategy right, if your audience are there, then you can make quick gains now, rather than wait till it is a bit more saturated and it'll have a harder job. If it is a bit more of a conservative brand, without knowing the brand and knowing what it is that you're trying to achieve, you can always look at audience behavior. I mean, TikTok from the outside looking in is, from many people's perspective, is just a place where young kids are doing these dances. But actually, there's a huge movement now into Learn with TikTok, where it's going to be the next, it's like a condensed TED Talk in 15, 30 a minute sessions of teaching young people how to get a mortgage, how to cook, how to learn about social media marketing. There's so much value in TikTok that I think spending a bit of time and looking at the type of content on there would be the best way to go to build a case of why you should use it, and then understand if that's where your audience are and that's who you're trying to reach, then you should look at how you can use it effectively.
Yeah, really interesting. And it's funny because I think brands are becoming a lot more open-minded, but that is something as an agency or not we face a lot. The more conservative, traditional, certainly B2B brands feel like that doesn't, it's not really within their remit to be on those platforms. But again, going back to, the customer insights, who the ideal persona is and where are they, that evidence, that data gives you that kind of pushback, doesn't it, to convince them that it's the right place to be. Okay, a little bit of career advice here from Jacqueline. So she's had a similar kind of background in terms of she's been applying for social media work, but she's coming from a kind of traditional print and digital media background. What she's saying is how any advice that you could give her in terms of moving from that kind of traditional media into social media, even though she's done lots of additional training?
I did a bit of it myself, so I spent a bit of time trying to learn myself. I started a company that I probably should have carried on with, but I didn't. That was more for me to learn how to do SEO and affiliate modeling, and that in just spending a bit of time doing that. And you don't have to have like the best idea in the world that you want to take to Dragon's Den and make a fortune off, but even building your own personal channels on social, you can then learn how to use it in the right way. And going into interviews where you've had that experience, even if it's on your own personal accounts, and demonstrating that you understand how things work and you've got the care for it and you've got a real passion for it, I think is the thing that I always look for in someone. So it doesn't automatically mean that you've got to have the background in it, but you've got to really be you've got to go that extra mile to show that you really care about the media that you want to go in, and it is easy. It's easier going that way from print, and because you can't make your own magazine and understand how to do that, but you can create your own Instagram page that you try and figure out the best performing type of content and how to grow it and what you want to put out there. So it is a bit of extra work on top of what you're doing now, but I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last question from Megan here. So do you have a prediction for what the next big platform might be after TikTok?
Oh, good question. I mean, we've had the launch of Clubhouse this year, and their launch strategy has been really interesting in terms of they've done it around a scarcity model. So you had to be invited by someone you knew to join at one point, and then they started opening it up. And Voice is really interesting because that platform, if you're not on it, it's a bit of a bombardment on the senses. And I don't think they found their niche yet in terms of what their value is within the market, but you can get access to people that you would never really hear from in the moment in real life through sound. So I was on there a little while ago and Paris Hilton popped on one of the things and was talking on it, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in the same room as Paris Hilton. This is amazing. Yeah. So I think things like that give us access to people's opinions in a different way. Clubhouse will definitely be something to watch. I think TikTok's just getting started, so I definitely keep an eye out on those. It's really hard to say. It's really I don't like getting prediction questions because I never know what the right thing is to
Completely.
say.
And you never know what's going to pop up from nowhere. I mean, Clubhouse seemed to come literally out of nowhere and then dominated everything for a little period, didn't it? So you never know what's around the corner. I guess that's the joy of social, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
Well, we're going to pause it there on the questions. We've got still a lot that have been unanswered, but we're starting to run out of time. So if you haven't had your question answered, we're taking a screen grab of these. We'll come back to you if we can. Please do reach out to either Maddie or myself at Fabric or Katie on socials, and we will do our very best to answer any questions that you have following the webinar. And we will send the recording out. I know lots of you have asked, so there will be an email that comes out with a link to the recording, so you can watch it back if you want to rewatch any certain bits. Also, I know there was a question in here about how do you go about setting a strategy. We have a webinar coming up on exactly that. So have a quick look on the Fabric website, but if you're on our mailing list, we'll be notifying you when that comes up. But it's a whole webinar on exactly how to build a strategy from the ground up. So a good one if that's what you're looking to do. So really just to say a huge thank you, Katie. It's been absolutely amazing to get some insights. I think we could talk for another hour. We've still got 19 questions that we haven't answered, but it's been really valuable, and thank you for sharing your story with us as well.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I was really cautious of how quickly I went through the first bit because there was so much detail in there. So hopefully the recording will help when you go back over it.
It absolutely will. I think there was.
If anyone's got any questions, you can reach out. My social channels are just at Katy with a Y and Leeson. So.
And if you haven't listened to Katie's podcast yet, I would definitely give that a check out. It's brilliant. It's really interesting, and just really honest and fascinating, and gives us a bit of a glimpse into your journey, definitely. So. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who's been here, and we look forward to seeing you all next week for another series of webinars, a brand new series of webinars that starts with Fabric next week. So check that out. And Katie, have a lovely rest of the day. We'll catch up soon.
Thank you. You too. Enjoy
Take
the rest
care.
of the holiday.
Thanks now. We'll do. Bye-bye.